In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. As you are aware, this is the eve of Valentine's Day, and of course then there is the national sports holiday of the Super Bowl that also takes place today. So I think you need to be greatly felicitated and commended that against all of these great obstacles of the sports world, you still found yourself here this morning. It's a very, very great sign of your perseverance and devotion. In any event, what we may need first to remember that there are two Saint Valentines. One is the Saint Valentine the Martyr, who is the saint, of course, of the Universal Church and of the Roman Catholic Church, and who is remembered really in the Valentine's Day celebrations throughout this country and other places. And the other one is our own special Gnostic saint, who is Valentinus, the great Gnostic father, who Valentinus of Rome, as we call him, because that is where he carried on much of his mission, although he was born in Carthage in North Africa, and that both of these are figures of the Christian and Gnostic tradition that we are devoted to and that we revere. So, who were these? The one that is or should be generally remembered at this time, Valentinus the Martyr was a Roman military officer stationed in Britain, who I think under one of the great persecutions, probably the one under Diocletian, was thrown in prison as a Christian and subsequently executed. And the tradition says that while he was thus imprisoned and awaiting his violent death, he wrote one or more very beautiful and very poetic love letters to his fiancée, saying goodbye to her, but also indicating that he was getting ready for the celestial marriage as a martyr. And this became a very notable event, especially in the British Isles and among the Roman armies who were there. And so he became a greatly revered saint of martyr saint of England. Now, not a terribly long time period from there was another Valentinus, who, as I indicated, was born in Carthage. That indicates that the likelihood that he was probably a dark-skinned gentleman, as the Carthaginians generally were, and who became one of the most endearing and most informative of the Gnostic fathers and teachers. Among other things, as interesting historical curiosity, but at the same time also, I think, quite significant, that he functioned as a Christian leader in Rome, and he was a candidate for the Bishop of Rome, which the people and the clergy elected, and he narrowly missed being elected Bishop of Rome. Now, you know, the other name by which the Bishop of Rome is generally known is that of Pope. And it certainly would have been exciting for us if we could point to having had a Gnostic Pope. But apparently it was not to be. He continued to teach in Rome, was highly regarded a man both as a religious teacher and as a writer of poetry, which occurs in the Pistis Sophia and other works which he is credited with having authored or at least inspired. And then in his old age he retired to the island of Cyprus, where he left for the Pleroma. And so it is our custom, although we are not always vociferously aware of it, that both of these Valentines are worthy of reverence. So we use the red color attributed to martyrs for the Holy Eucharist today, but at the same time we had several scriptures which are attributed to the Gnostic Valentinus or have probably been actually written by him. So these are lovely remembrances, because as was held in the Christian Church from a very early time on, the inspiration and the grace that comes to us through the saints is an important one. And this is not, of course, not only Christian, but it exists all over the world. Buddhism has its saints, Islam has its saints, the Hindus have their saints, so that, let us say, the Church Triumphant, as it has been called, is a well-known spiritual understanding of reality. So that it is important for us to be able to reach out, in this case, to those who walked here on earth and who were concerned with the same spiritual realities as ourselves, and who have been helpers of the spiritual destiny of humanity. Sometimes this function resulted in martyrdom. And we may need to remember that the martyrs are not only people who have died for the right spiritual cause, but also people who have maybe did not die but have suffered. And let us say every historical period, unfortunately including our own, has, let's say, offered to heaven such sacrificial victims in abundance. It wouldn't be particularly important for you. I could name you at least a dozen names from my home country, mostly priests and bishops who have died at the hands of the Bolsheviks who conquered our country, and others such as the late and great hero of the Hungarian people, Cardinal Joseph Mindszenty, who suffered, let's say, very greatly also at that period of time. So let's say martyrdom has always been with us. But so have, let's say, those holy souls who helped their fellow humans in spiritual things primarily, who gave their life by living. And such a one was certainly Valentinus, who was greatly respected in the ancient world, even by those who were not Gnostic Christians or other kinds of Christians, or for that matter of the pre-Christian religion of Rome. Valentinus was regarded as an outstanding individual, both of the spirit and of learning. His message, let's say, each one of the Gnostic teachers we might say, had a particular keynote, but that of Valentinus is particularly significant for two reasons. I'm sure there are more than two, there are two that come to mind. One of them was that he was very vociferous and very involved in writing about it, of the importance of the feminine aspect of the deity in the Gnosis, and how this should be remembered and revered. It is generally believed that a great volume, which is usually referred to by the Greek name the Pistis Sophia, which means Sophia the Faithful, was either written, or at least part of it was written and heavily inspired by Valentinus, and that what is often referred to by the scholars as the Valentinian Gnosis has always been very prominent in its reverence for and its exposition of the importance of the feminine principle, especially as manifest in the transcendental and mythic figure of the Holy Sophia. Also, that is, let's say, his one and very important contribution. The second contribution for which scholarship credits Valentinus of Rome is that he was very insistent upon the continuing relationship of Catholic Christianity and the Gnosis. He did not regard his own contribution to the wisdom tradition as being very different from or opposed to the teachings of the mainstream church, which very soon after his time then harbored such hierarchs as Irenaeus of Lyon and others, who was, let's say, in an adversarial relationship to the Gnostics of the territory where he lived, and where, let's say, the conflict between the so-called right believers, for which the Greek word is orthodox, and the Gnostics came about. So Valentinus felt that it was legitimate and important that there should be a school, there should be a branch of the Christian church which is interested in the dimensions of Christian practice and teaching that goes beyond the one that the majority of the people were following. And this is, after all, a very common tradition in religion. And we can look almost anywhere in the religions of the East, of the Middle East, and we find that there are people who have the desire and the capacity to look for the deeper mysteries of their particular faith. It's no need for me to start recounting them, it would take up too much time, but I'm quite certain that you realize that. And so he very strongly insisted, for instance, that the mysteries, as they were called by universal Christendom, are still called in most of the Orthodox churches, such as Greek, Russian, Syrian, and so forth, the mysteries which we refer to usually as the sacraments, that these are of extremely great importance, and that the participation in the mysteries is a very important way to the gnosis. And so the kind of misunderstood statements or misunderstandings of the realities which we encounter throughout history, oh, well, the Gnostics, they were all intellectuals. They were philosophizing about the faith, but it's the so-called Orthodox who practice it. It's not really true. And so Valentinus said in effect that spiritual things are not here primarily to be thought about. You can think till, as the rural metaphor has it, you can think till the cows come home, but it will not bring you closer to the divine, because it addresses itself to the particular layers of consciousness, which what Carl Jung would call the thinking function. But that a much greater portion of the human being has to be engaged, and that this engagement in turn occurs by way of the mysteries, by way of the sacraments. You know, actually, this is not that much different, at least from the practical side, of the pre-Christian religions of, say, Greece and Rome and Egypt, because there was always, let's say, there were the religious observances and beliefs of large numbers of people, but there were always those who, let's say, were selected by their own soul and taken out of the majority, and who became a spiritual minority because they came to be members of the mystery traditions, which of course we know a good deal about, some of the, especially the ones in Greece. And so the issue that there is a general belief, spiritual belief, worldview that people have, what in German we call Weltanschauung, on the one hand, and there is the mystical spirituality, the spirituality of the mystery on the other hand, and that the best arrangement is when these two can work together. Let's say this emphasis came very, very powerfully from Valentinus, and has remained in various ways within and in the underground of the Christian tradition. And therefore, Gnosis is not an intellectual understanding, but it has, let's say, intellectual aspects and ramifications. And among them primarily is that, as you are well aware, I'm sure, that there are great and in many ways disturbing and maybe disastrous contradictions in the dogmatic structure of the Christian Church, both in East and West. And among them being that, I'm just going to throw out the chief one, perhaps that has always appeared, but there are many others, that how could there be a benign, a kindly, a fatherly Godhead, divine figure, have created such a world that is so filled with suffering and misery and wrong-headedness and a number of other epithets that we could come up with. You know, why? Why is creation so weird? Why do all living beings fight each other and eat each other? Why is the great mantra of the universe munch, munch, munch? These are serious questions. They occurred to me when I was a child already. And my parents said, oh, well, you shouldn't worry about that now, maybe later. Maybe later in life. Incidentally, I want you to know, not that it's of any importance to anyone, that of the baptismal names that I received as a newborn infant, several, Andrew, Henry, Maurice, Valentine. And that was the only name that my father insisted that I received the baptismal name of Valentine, and he would never tell anybody, including myself, why he chose that. He had some private reason for it, but of course he lived in England for a very long time, so I'm sure he knew a great deal about the Valentine mythology of Valentine the Martyr there. So this is of course just a personal note, but on the whole, let us say the incongruities and the contradictions between much religious teaching and the reality of the world has always been there, and has always been of a disturbing nature to a lot of people. And it's so we find among many others in the Gnostic tradition that let's say the mystery of creation is not as cut and dried and simple as it is explained in the catechisms, but that, let us say, the ultimate and benign divine presence did not directly involve itself in the creation of the material universe and the creatures there. That there are two different things. This is the whole mystery of the demiurge and the ultimate Godhead, which are in great detail and with many beautiful poetic passages explained in the Pistis Sophia that was possibly written by Valentinus. And so, let's say, some of the great questions that arise in people's minds in connection with the Christian tradition and its creation myths and various other teachings is solved by the Gnostics. It wasn't the good God who created the tiger, as William Blake in his wonderful poem, the tiger, tiger burning bright in the forests of the night. So he says, here is, this awesome and bloodthirsty carnivore, which of course we are ourselves too, the tiger, is it the same God who created the tiger, who created the lamb? This is the metaphor that William Blake uses. These are serious questions. And if you have, experienced, as we all do, to a greater or lesser extent, the incongruities and then difficulties of earthly life, then these questions arise. So the Gnostics had very interesting and to some of us very satisfying explanations for these anomalies and circumstances. But the ultimately important issue is that we are able, by way of our participation in the mysteries within our own souls and facilitated by the sacramental mysteries, we are able to rise above these difficulties. Just like we need to rise above the difficulties that are going on in our culture right now. If we think about them too much, if we are on that thinking level, then they don't make any sense. But of course, if you look into history, most policies and decrees of governments throughout history didn't make all that much sense. But they were there, and they were enforced just the same. So we need to use our thinking function in order to perhaps ameliorate these discrepancies to a certain extent. But the ultimate solution is implicit in the ritual phrase which we repeat in the Holy Eucharist: lift up your hearts, in Latin, sursum corda. And when our hearts are lifted up to a level that is beyond these anomalies and contradictions, then all of a sudden they don't matter anymore. Because our consciousness has shifted to a level where we are above that. See, and this is a very important issue. We can continue to fall into the mud at the ground level and be tormented by the unfortunate circumstances of earthly life. Because that's where we are, and we will experience those. And they involve all kinds of things. They involve sickness, they involve epidemics, they involve criminality. I don't want to go on with it because it would get too depressing. But let us say that is there. And if that is all there is, then literally heaven help us. But it is not all. And heaven is helping us in the sense of having implanted into us abilities, talents, as the ancients called it, which allow us to rise up from these unfortunate circumstances and to allow our consciousness to enter a realm that is beautiful, that is helpful, that is inspiring, and that ultimately is liberating and salvific. But we have to exercise these faculties. We have to say no to the unfortunate that is there, that we are not going to be involved in it, at least not any longer, and that we rise above it, from whence we can observe the difficult world, but we are in a world that is beyond those difficulties. You know, this is possible, and we have all experienced it longer or shorter in our lives, and we can experience it again. Because if we don't do that, then this contradictory world of opposites where everything is fighting everything else and ultimately eating everything else has got us in its claws. But, you know, fortunately we are able to gradually, no doubt, and not without difficulty, to free ourselves from those claws, and then it's an entirely different matter. But this will involve, as Valentinus said, not only the theory, but the practice of the mystery. We have to approach the divine mystery and allow it to interact with the mystery within us, and thereby overcome the ongoing and ever-present contradictions and difficulties of this world. But what do we do? What do we do instead of this? Oh well, we have politics. We have warfare. Oh, we are going to create a perfect world. Mm-hmm. When has there ever been a perfect world? Oh, that doesn't matter, we are going to make it. Ah, sure, yeah, you are going to make it, you, with your prideful ego. the issue is not to make a new world. The issue is to make a new reality. And you have that reality within yourself already. You may not recognize it, we all have it, and if we cultivate it, and we cultivate it in the mystery, and reinforce that with the theoretical, then we are on the right track. And it's that kind of a balanced view that as much as we are able to discover from his works and from his contribution Valentinus made to the Christian tradition, it's very worth remembering, and it is very worth putting into practice. So let's be happy that we have two Valentines. We have the dying lover and a martyr, and we have the one who gave his life and his wisdom for the Gnosis, and together they show us the way to greater and better and more enlightened consciousness. And so may the mystery of that which hangs twixt heaven and earth descend upon us and remain with us always. Amen.